I'm Jon Kiper. Welcome to the Jon Kiper Show. I'm here with my co-host, guest, Steve.
Hi, my name is Steve Pesic, and I'm happy to be here today on the Jon Kiper Show.
You know, you just moved to New Hampshire. You're in the process of moving to New Hampshire. And this past weekend, you know, we both participated in the No Kings protests. How was that for you?
Well, I'm kind of a weird transplant. I'm from Minnesota originally. I moved to Massachusetts about 8 years ago, and now I'm in the process of moving to the western portion of the state in the Sunapee area. And I hit the morning No Kings protest in Claremont, so I started my day in Claremont. And there was probably a few hundred or so individuals there, right in like kind of the downtown area of Claremont. And then into the afternoon, again, being new to the Granite State, I had never been to the State House before. So I had never seen the Golden Dome in person. I had never been in that area. And I was like, No Kings, let's get to the State House. No Kings 2, I was in New London near Colby Sawyer College, and there was a good turnout for that. So I was like, well, the State House is gonna have to have an even bigger turnout. And I was not wrong. There was, in my estimate, I'm guessing throughout the day, nearly 10,000 people that were probably in and around the State House throughout that day. And I spent the day going up and down the street, just listening and talking to people. And I thought it was a pretty impressive showing by Granite Staters to be out that day.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Where were you again?
I started out in Newmarket, and it was kind of funny because at the last minute, one of the women that runs the Newmarket protest, we have a protest every Saturday from noon till 1. They've been doing it since 2020. My buddy Larry started it. Sometimes he's the only one out there. Sometimes there's one or two of them, but obviously lately there's been more like 5 or 6. And they stand out there with signs every Saturday. So some of those folks approached me and said, hey, can we come down to your headquarters and make signs? So it was great. I had a bunch of ladies in here making signs the night before. And I didn't realize, because I wasn't here for the previous No Kings protest, but they had close to 1,000 people last time, apparently. And so this time I stayed in Newmarket for a bit, and there was probably 500 or 600 when I was there. I don't think it was quite 1,000, but there might have been after I left because I was only there for about an hour. And they stayed for 3 hours.
That's a lot.
But it was great. It was fairly jovial. It was funny. There was this one woman who used to be a regular in my restaurant, who's maybe a few bricks shy of a load, who drove through. Just furiously honking her horn, but in like an angry way. But it was hard to tell an angry knock or an angry honk from a supportive honk.
Oh yeah.
We were getting many supportive honks as well. So it was kind of cracked me up because like she was screaming at us and was like slamming her horn, but it was in a way that was sort of imperceptible.
Like a Honda horn is a mean horn, and like a Toyota horn is a happy horn. Yeah, I don't know.
It was funny, but. I hung out with them for a while, and then I went to Portsmouth, and man, Portsmouth was crazy.
Yeah, I saw videos that you sent and other volunteers sent from Portsmouth, and it looked packed.
I was trying to find some people that I knew that were there, and there was no chance. I mean, literally, it was similar to fish shows I've been to at the beginning, where literally, because Portsmouth doesn't exactly have a central like square like the State House does.
Okay.
So people were lined up on the sides of the road, of the street, all the way down, from Market Square, and so you're kind of like weaving through all these people with all their signs, and there was literally like a drum circle here, another drum circle here, a group of folks singing like protest choral hymns over here, a brass band. It was quite a scene. It was cool though. It was definitely exciting to just be around that energy, and I think people were excited to just see that they weren't the only ones feeling like things are getting crazy in our country. And I think that's really, people got to understand there's a lot of reasons we protest. One of them is just to be around a group of people that are like-minded and feel like, hey, I'm not alone in my struggles.
Yeah, I definitely picked up on that from talking to people in Claremont and in Concord. I was going up and down the street just saying hello, thanking people for being at the protest, and kind of reading signs to get where people are coming from. And a lot of people, again, from me being from Minnesota, had signs specifically about the ICE presence in Minnesota and about people like Renee Good or Alex Preddy.
Yeah.
And I made it easy for me to approach them because what they had their care about was directly connected to where I grew up and where my family is. And so it was great to hear like-minded voices and just kind of get an understanding of where everyone's kind of mind is at currently here in that mud season of New Hampshire. As the snow is going away and the rains are coming in and the mud is, kind of soaking it all up, and maybe we get some new growth coming soon and we get greener times ahead. That's very much where No Kings 3.0 felt. It's like we're in this big kind of global uncertainty right now, and we're in the mud, and we need to start seeing some new growth quickly.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's kind of funny. If I had been running that New Kings protest, I probably would have framed more of it as an anti-war protest, because that's kind of what I was thinking when I was going out there. Obviously, a lot of things to protest right now. I made a sign that said, fund schools, not bombs. And I got a lot of positive feedback on that sign from people. I think particularly having just gone through the budget process, and, a lot of communities are still going through it with schools and people saying, hey, we don't have enough money for teachers in our town. Claremont's millions of dollars short of their budget. A bunch of other towns are suffering. Nashville is suffering. You're going to have to lay off all these teachers. And then to see at the same time, the United States initiating another war in the Middle East, trillions of dollars in debt. I think people are starting to really question the leadership here. I don't think that's out of...
I think there's more than questions. Yeah. Tens of thousands of people, over 8 million people nationwide that were able to make it, were saying, hey, enough is enough here. We need to start pivoting back to community first kind of mindset where the wars that we're trying to fight globally the optics are outside of everything that we need to do hyper locally here. If we can't fix what's in our own backyards now, why are we going outside of our own borders to take on other people? Where's the outside influence that might be pulling the strings at this right now?
Yeah, and I think that, we got to look at campaign finance and the fact that we've got this amalgamation of, foreign entities that are funding our political system. And that's kind of converged with a bunch of these tech companies and the military-industrial complex. And they're now just chomping at the bit for an opportunity to see the military use million-dollar missiles that they then have to buy more. To expend these defense resources to continually churn the money into the military-industrial complex. So it goes, from these groups like AIPAC, the Israeli lobby, and these other sort of war hawk donors to the politicians. In the military-industrial complex, those industries are donating to the politicians, and then the politicians are voting for war at a time when I think the majority, of people are against spending more money on war. Some of us on the left are more on the humanitarian side. We don't want to see people dying in foreign wars. And some of the right are saying, for fiscal reasons, we can't support this war. But that's what I find kind of ironic is when it comes to, spending on the military, particularly right now anyway, the rank and file Democrats and Republicans are both saying, hey, is this the best use of our money? Is this what we're going to do? I've seen people on the far right, Lauren Boebert said, hey, I'm not voting for more military spending. We need to invest in the U.S. I've seen some other very far right Republicans say, hey, we don't have money for wars in Israel. What's his name? Tucker Carlson, great example. He has come out in very much against the war in Israel. Charlie Kirk was against the war in Iran, And so it's funny to have commonality with these far right people about this issue. But then begs the question, how is it possible that the rank and file are almost bipartisanly against more military spending, and yet Congress is bipartisanly voting in support of more military spending.
Yeah, I don't hold those offices. I don't know what's happening in these backroom conversations, but it seems like what's coming out is both the Republicans and the Democrats are still trying to find ways to listen to what's happening behind closed doors and still get these bills and stuff coming across. And that includes with some of the federal representation that we have here in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I mean, I was very disappointed to see our Democrat Chris Pappas, Congressional District 1. You know, he came out recently, I think it was March 10th or 11th, and he was at an AIPAC event. One of his biggest donor is AIPAC. They've given him millions of dollars. And he said, you know, I firmly stand behind Israel and this war in Iran, and we've got to do it to keep the people of the world safe and the people of the United States safe, which is a crazy thing to say because this war is not only putting the entire region at risk of a bigger war, which apparently seems to be happening, but also, you know, restricting the flow of goods out of the Strait of Hormuz, particularly not just petroleum, liquid natural gas, but also farming implements such as nitrogen-based fertilizer and urea.
Which is most fertilizer.
And that's what we need to grow, food, in most places that aren't using regenerative agriculture. So they're risking literally the food supply of the entire world for this complete folly in the Middle East. And to see someone like Chris Pappas, who I thought was an intelligent person, pursuing what is completely an insane, war. And I heard just the other day, actually earlier today, it was a guy who had worked in the Clinton administrations. He was in the CIA in intelligence. And he said, since literally the 80s, every leader of Israel, every leader of Israel has come to the president of the United States and said, we need to bomb Iran. And every president before Trump, every single Democrat or Republican, George Bush, Clinton, all of them said, we're not going to do that. It would cause World War III. We don't want to do that. We don't want to start off the Strait of Hormuz. There's too much, risk there. And so it's just really disappointing to see, both the Republicans and the Democrats lining up for a war that nobody wants, we can't afford, and there doesn't seem to be, any recourse.
Yeah, it's really tough right now. I mean, and I think that's where being at the No Kings protest and listening and talking to other like-minded individuals, you could sense the frustration and feel just the hairs on their arms and the back of their neck standing up with just passion for big global things like that, but then also, like I was talking about, like hyper locally to here.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people out there right now within the communities all across America, New England, New Hampshire, insert local county, that want to do more and they want to step up and help. And you're running for governor to help New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And getting people that want to help New Hampshire is a big thing right now. And I feel, from being like an outsider new to New Hampshire, as I listen and I talk about specific topics with others, a lot of the things that you recently wrote about in your book, Community First Economics, was right on the tip of the tongue of everyone, with housing and healthcare and affordability and public schools.
Yeah.
Those four pillars were pretty much what everybody was saying. Now with gas prices going up and food prices eventually going to be going up, this is going to be a hot summer, maybe not temperature-wise, but just the feeling of the pressure on everyone here in New Hampshire as well as New England, as is America.
Definitely. I think that this war in Iran is going to make what was a bad economic situation before, with the tariffs and the lack of tourism and all these, and just even still getting over COVID, it's going to make all of that just 10 times worse. The things that I've been reading about the, projections for the future are just so dire that I think people are really going to have an appetite for a new type of leadership that's not really in what has become the Democratic or the Republican brands. I mean, both of them seem to prioritize the wishes of one particularly particular Middle Eastern Middle Eastern country over those of us. You know, I mean, the billions of dollars we're sending to Israel could do so many good things for the people of the United States, you know, funding healthcare or education or housing or whatever. And yet we send it to this country that seems hell-bent on starting World War III. I mean, I can't see any other explanation. They seem to be okay with that.
Yeah, whatever the 4D chess long game is that they're not letting us in on, I haven't seen the angle that's being played that is going to make everything happy-go-lucky here locally. If you've seen it, let me know, but I haven't seen it, and it isn't as obvious for me to zoom out and see where this is going. I'm a person that loves to travel. I have an international trip to the Mediterranean that I scheduled back in December 2024 coming up now. And it's like,
wow, that's wild.
Exactly. Think about how long ago that was. But coming like, oh, I need to start looking at hotels and booking flights to go towards closer to where a major global skirmish is.
Yeah.
That's like, is it really smart to go on this trip that you already paid for like almost 2 years ago? Like it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I travel a lot too, and like, I have. It's been a little while since I went to Mexico a couple of years ago, but in my 20s, I traveled a lot, and just the risk that this kind of action is going to put on every American abroad. I mean, right now in Vietnam and in parts of Thailand and Asia, they're running out of petroleum, they're running out of gas, they're closing down schools, people are being inflicted on this unnecessary economic burden, which I can only imagine is not going to make them love Americans any more than they did before. In fact, it might make them really dislike Americans. And I think it's putting all of us, lumping us all into this really negative category of colonial empire hell-bent on, I mean, what is the point in Iran? I mean, you can't even say it's a war for oil because like the U.S. is the leading exporter of oil. It's crazy. I don't know if you saw this, but I talked to a guy from Iran. He contacted me through Instagram, and he's got a lot of followers in Iran, and he said, hey, I just want to chat with you, Zoom. And he just wanted to talk to an average American and sort of tell him about what was going on. And one of the things that was really interesting is he was telling me that before the war, you had people that were pro the Islamic Republic and people that were against it. And obviously they were protesting and there was all this stuff. He said since the war has happened, they're all pretty much united against the U.S. And he said that they're having these massive like parades, sort of like parties in the street every night where people just to defy the U.S. are out there with flags and they're chanting. And he's like, it's both groups are there now. Like they've successfully united the opposition in the U.S., which like is just so obviously what would happen, And I'm sure that the military knew that this would happen. It's probably one of the other reasons they didn't do it.
I mean, it's happened in countless countries throughout decades of global war. Like that when the American political machine comes in and says, oh, we're going to come in and we're going to do things our way. Nobody asked the people that were living there day to day if that's what they wanted. And then once the American soldiers and troops pack up and go, then what's left and who's there to help? And then if we cut all our foreign aid, then we have nobody to help them clean up, and it's even worse.
In that context, I'll be honest, it's becoming harder and harder to want to be on the Democratic side. It just seems like they are becoming more and more Republican, and less interested in helping our communities and building up our communities. And in my mind, if you have two parties, if one of them starts a war, the other one should be against the war, Interesting conversation I had when I was running the last time. This was quite interesting. We talked to a Palestinian guy who had lived here since the 90s, and he owned a pizza shop. And it was so ironic because he said, I'm hoping Trump wins. And I thought, or no, he was like, I don't know if he said I'm hoping Trump wins, but he said maybe if Trump wins, at least then the Democrats will oppose the war because now it'll be Trump's war and not Biden's.
Sure.
And it was just so sort of cynical and sad that he had to be at that position, where he was wanting, just the Democrats to do something. When you look at the devastation in Gaza, and it's like, okay, Joe Biden facilitated this for sure. His administration let this happen, gave them billions of dollars in ways that previous presidents would not do. Ronald Reagan, when they were doing some stuff he didn't like with the Palestinians, he cut them off, threatened to. And Biden could have done that at any point. So it's hard to see that where we're at with Iran is not, and with Israel, was not completely facilitated by the Democrats, by the Biden administration. And then also even just the point that Congress has no power anymore to even stop them. This has all been incrementally happening since 9/11, and even before, since Vietnam, let's be honest, where Congress has lost the power to decide if they can declare war or not. Now the president's basically, using this power that I think everyone kind of assumed no one would in the way that he's doing because Congress has given up so much. And so how do we get to a point where we have a party that's a peace party?
I think that's the big feeling, again, as I was talking about from being on the ground for the No Kings protest, was that you just feel, you can see it in people's faces, you can hear it in their voice, you can just see their demeanor. They just kind of feel beaten up by everybody right now, because when they're trying to run and to find the helpers, those helpers aren't there helping. And it's not like they're actively hurting them, but there's a level of hurt by doing nothing and doing less. And that sometimes is being complicit in it all. And that complacency leads to the people with the bigger voice or the bigger payroll and the bigger war chest to come in and say, well, as long as you're going to be apathetic about this, stay that way, because we're going to just hold court and run shop here, and just, we're going to do what we want to do. You can just go ahead and be yourself. That's fine. Get your votes, be your candidate, shake hands, kiss babies, whatever you want to do. But it seems like there's no punchback, there's no fight back. And I feel like that's what you're trying to do in your run for governor here in New Hampshire is fight back. And how do you do it? Who are you supposed to, now that you're in this, this governor's race, are you supposed to be fighting Kelly Ayotte? Are you supposed to be fighting anybody else that's trying to run for the Democratic nomination? Are you supposed to fight libertarians? Are you supposed to be fighting free staters? Or are you supposed to be listening to the people in the state and try to gather them together to listen to their voices and try to push forward with a collective group of like-minded individuals that maybe are sick of the way the Democrats have started to get a little bit more conservative. And the Republicans for going far MAGA right. And the Free Staters for dismantling everything. Like, how do you feel like you're fitting in right now in this new world political game?
Well, it's interesting. So in 2023, I initially, when I first started running for governor, I wanted to run as an independent, because I have always thought that the biggest issue in our whole government is the two-party system and how it feels captured. I felt that pretty much my entire voting life, that I was always voting for less of two evils. Aside from when I voted for Bernie Sanders twice, it never felt like there was someone that was actually like gonna help me. It was more like I'm voting for harm reduction, And so that is something I've always wanted to do. And when I was going to run for governor, people said, hey, you got to run as a Democrat. If you run as an independent, no one will take you seriously. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And I did not get a lot of support from the Democrats in my first run, but I had gotten in late. There was already two people running, Joyce Craig and Cindy Warmington. They got most of the endorsements, most of the money. Thought, okay. And I did all right, 10%. And when I came to run again, initially I was running as an independent because, again, I wanted to form my own party, to do my own thing. I'm more of an independent person. I think New Hampshire has a lot of independent voters, and that we could use an independent governor who's kind of above the two-party fray, sort of acting like the sane arbiter of truth,
A qualified listener.
And I really thought that would work in New Hampshire. And then what happened for me is I was looking at everything that was happening with Donald Trump and the authoritarianism, and I was like, wow, this is on a level that I never anticipated. I think most of us probably would agree on that.
I mean, I anticipated it a little bit, but then it jumped the shark.
Yeah. And I mean, so rapidly, just, the full muzzle velocity or whatever Bannon called it. And I said, whoa, like, this isn't the time for third parties. This isn't the time for experimenting. This is a time where all the Democrats are going to galvanize together, and the centrist Democrats are going to work with the progressives, and the DSA is going to work with we're all going to be one big happy family and just fighting Trump and MAGA and the authoritarianism. Boy, was I wrong. Boy, was I wrong. I mean, we got in the race, and then I was like, all right, well, I'm going to run as a Democrat. They can't find a candidate. And just basically, completely, not just ignored by the Democratic establishment, but actively, hurting my campaign, making it very difficult for us to run. For instance, some of the town and county chairs not getting back to us when we're trying to set up meetings with them. The leadership really not being particularly supportive in a number of different ways. And I kept saying, and I told them this, I kept saying, I'm only in this because there's nobody else in it. And if somebody else wants to get in this race, I don't need to run as a Democrat. I can go back to running as an independent, but y'all don't have a candidate, basically. And one of the frustrating things that was happening when we were running as an independent is I was making calls to donors, and they were saying, well, who are you running against? Who's a Democrat? I'm saying, well, there isn't one. They said, well, call me back when you know. So I was like, well, I'll just be the Democrat then. And then I started making calls as a Democrat, and I kept hearing from some of the Democratic donors, oh, well, I heard so-and-so is going to run, so I'm going to wait and find out who the basically establishment candidate is. And it didn't look like anyone was going to run. At the last minute, recently, Cindy Warmington has announced that she's running. For those of you who don't know, and I'd be surprised if anyone listening to this doesn't know, she's basically the reason I started running in 2023, former lobbyist for Purdue Pharma. Someone I just didn't really think should be the Democratic nominee, lobbyist for Purdue Pharma. Not only did she do that, but she has been defending these pain clinics around New Hampshire that have prescribed a lot of opioids and hurt a lot of people, killed a lot of people. And I just thought somebody like that, having grown up in that era of opioid addiction and heroin addiction, seeing how much destructive it was to our state, I didn't want to support her. And to have her come back is really disappointing. And to have, the Democratic establishment line up behind her.
Well, because she just lost 2 years ago in the Democratic primary, and just because Joyce Craig isn't in it now, there was the assumption she was going to win, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's why you would assume she is going in.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's Jon Kiper that I'd be running against. It's not Joyce Craig. I can beat Jon Kiper. That's what you would have to think that's going to be the way. But again, if there's enough like-minded individuals that believe in your community first policies,
yeah,
then you can win as a Democrat. You can win as an independent.
Yeah.
Not to say that you can run as a Republican, but I mean, based off of where the party systems are now, I feel like you have enough excitement behind this campaign from talking to people on the street against those same pillars we talked about earlier, that I think it's due time where we need to try to find some more people that are on this Team Kiper train of what do you believe in and why?
And I think it's really important to realize we are at a historical moment for a realignment politically. And that happens whenever neither one of the two parties is addressing the
elephant in the room.
Yeah, which right now it's inequality, and it's this manipulation of our government by a foreign entity, being Israel. We need to just talk about that in a realistic way. It's not conspiracy theory. I was just reading about how this company Palantir, who is heavily invested in surveillance equipment and surveillance technology, they have been working with the Israeli government to help target people in Gaza, to target people in Iran. That same technology is being used by ICE in the United States. And we're seeing this kind of merger of, Palantir, which a bunch of their tech executives became part of the military recently. They're made like lieutenants basically in the U.S. military. I don't know if you heard about this.
I did not, but that scares me dramatically.
Yeah, basically just given military credentials to be ingratiated into our military and basically taking this surveillance technology and using it on everyone in the world.
I mean, that doesn't seem very live free or die to me. Like, that seems pretty much like most people that I've talked to in New Hampshire would probably not like that.
No, and the only reason it's even possible is because a lot of people aren't paying attention to the news right now. So we're at this very important moment in history where I think neither of the parties are addressing the issues. Neither of the parties really want to reform. And it's going to be a number of things, but the big reason also is the evolution of AI. Whenever there's a big change in technology, there's a political realignment, like with the rise of industrialization. Now you have labor unions,
Sure.
forming and this sort of thing. So we're at a bifurcation point, a split in history, and there's basically two ways we can go. One is AI authoritarianism, and one is AI sort of techno-utopia, the solar punk future, where robots and humans work together to, clean up the environment and, make all of our wildest dreams about, housing and education and lowering taxes come true. And we can do this.
I think we can do this, but I don't see the people that are making millions and billions of dollars the other way saying we're good with not doing that anymore.
Well, and this kind of comes back to the captures of the fact that the two parties are captured by these same tech oligarchs are, partially responsible for the military-industrial complex. So it's kind of the same world that is, through the campaign finance system, bought up both of our sides of our political machine. And so the question is, initially I thought, again, like I was saying, the Democrats are going to be open to having just lost an election terribly as for governor and for the president, are going to be open to new ideas, fresh voices, letting some younger-ish people into the fold. And that's just not been the case at all. And it's been really disappointing. And we're really looking right now to build a coalition of people who are not just on the left, but people on the right who are starting to wake up and realize, one, the Republicans in New Hampshire are free state libertarians who want no government and no taxes. It's not low government, low taxes, which is important for people to know. And so the Republican Party is basically gone in New Hampshire. And people that are also looking at the Republicans nationally and going, hey, I may have voted for Trump, but this isn't what I wanted. This war in the Middle East is not what I wanted. The ICE, dragging people out of their cars, smashing windows, shooting people. I think you've got Republicans upset. I think you've got a lot of Democrats upset. And how do we work to build, a new coalition of voters? Because I think this is really important for people to understand about coalition building. The Democrats had a coalition that got Obama elected that basically fractured. That's why Trump got elected in 2016. Partially, they were able to pull it together to get Joe Biden elected in 2020. And I think that had a lot to do with COVID. And then in 2024, that coalition completely fractured again. Trump gets elected. And so how do we build this coalition? And can we do it within the Democratic, or I guess the Republican Party? Or do we have to do it outside of that? Because it seems like it's getting harder and harder for us as a working class campaign to operate with the Democrats. They seem to really not appreciate anybody except the ones with money.
I don't have money. I wish I could help, but I'm not that guy.
Well, it's been quite interesting because the way that they describe me is, it's always third tier, not serious candidate. And a lot of that, it seems to just stem from the money. It doesn't matter that I was at 39% at a poll at one point against Kelly Ayotte. This recent poll was a little bit lower at 30%, but still, I'm not at 1%. I'm
or you're not even in the race. You're not zero. You're here.
Yeah.
You're doing the work. You're talking to people. I found you. Other people have found you. You're running with your own ideas, which aren't the normal ideas that everyone has had for decades and decades and decades that got us into this position to begin with.
Yeah.
So how do we get out of it?
Yeah, that's it. So, what we really want to do is start building a community-first coalition, a community-first group of people, who not just voters, but also politicians and people who are running for office. And in my mind, you could be a community first Democrat, you could be a community first Republican, you could be a community first independent. It really doesn't matter. And in fact, I would encourage people to run under whatever party they can get elected with in their area. You know, if you're in a hard red area, maybe you can't win as a Republican, and you can't win as a Democrat because you're not connected to the Republicans, but maybe you can win as an independent, you know? Or maybe you're in a hardcore Democrat area, run as a Democrat, you know, if you've got connections with those folks. A community first Democrat. What does that really mean? It's, you know, community first is saying, all right, we're going to put our community first when we're making decisions. So I'm going to say, is this bill or is this change in the law going to help my local community? Is it going to help Newmarket, or is it going to hurt it? You know, a case in point, these education vouchers. That doesn't help my town to send a bunch of millions of dollars to private schools. That doesn't help the community in Newmarket. I want my public school to be as funded and as dynamic as possible. And obviously there's a little bit of wiggle room there. There's going to be debate about what is putting community first, and that's okay. You know, we welcome debate.
Yeah, having the conversation is what politics is about.
Yeah.
Like, and you need to have discourse. You need to be listening. You need to be actively talking to other people. You can't just put yourself into an echo chamber and think change is going to happen.
Yeah.
And it seems like we've been voting that way for decades and years that, oh, well, the Democrats are going to change or the Republicans are going to change. Like, they haven't changed.
Yeah. And I think what I've seen happen is it seems, I think they call this the ratchet effect, where it's like the ship is sinking, and with Democrats, or with Republicans, it's sinking pretty fast. With Democrats, it's still sinking, but it's sinking slightly slower, you know?
So you feel better about the sinking?
I know,
like,
right?
Yeah.
So
I still have enough money to go to the movies or like get that extra, you know, splurge spend of the week. It's not I'm washed up.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we're going to get to this economic point because of what we've been talking about with Iran, that people are going to be really hurting and they're going to be looking for a new vision. And that's what we laid out in Community First Economics in the book. And, you know, the four guiding principles that I've sort of come up with, and this may change, may expand, but the first one was, you know, we want politicians and voters who are going to support community first policies on housing, education, healthcare. The second one is we don't hate people. I added that one in because I was like, what if Nazis want to join this coalition? I'm like, okay, we don't hate people. We don't allow people in that are professing hate. You can disagree with people without hating them, you know? The third thing is we don't take money from people that are trying to control our message. And this has happened to me. I've had people say, donors say, hey, don't talk about climate change. Don't talk about taxing the rich, and I'll give you money. And that is something, as a community first politician, I'm not going to do.
Yeah, that seems opposite of helping your community.
Yeah. So, you know, we community first policies, we support, number one. Number two, we don't hate anybody. Number three, we do not take money from organizations that are going to try and control us. And the fourth one is that we support democratic changes that will help anyone participate in the political process. So that means ranked choice voting. Specifically in New Hampshire, it means paying the state reps, potentially, even lowering the number of reps. I've heard a lot of people say that would be a better way to facilitate our government. You know, we have a real problem with 400 reps writing thousands of bills, and it really clogs up the process.
Yeah, again, as a new person or a new homeowner here in New Hampshire, when I learned that there was 400 plus people in the House of Representatives for a state of 1.4 million, I was like, why? Like, why? And then to hear that they don't get paid and get to travel from the top of the state all the way like to Concord, It's like Concord is not dead center. It's shaded a little south. So I feel for anybody that's coming. Is it Coos County?
Yeah, Coos.
Coos County.
Yeah.
Like, at the top, like that's got to be a long way to make no money, especially with gas at $4 a gallon.
To be fair, they do get a gas. They do get a gas stipend.
Oh, sure.
They get a travel stipend. But yeah, so Community First Coalition is really where we're moving this whole operation to sort of create a bigger movement that will outlast me and this cycle, this campaign cycle. And I really, I will likely be the only community first candidate on the ballot this year. We'll see. Maybe we can grab some other state reps, maybe some people running for Senate. We'll see. But what we're hoping is that we can build a movement that going forward into 2028 and 2030 will become what we really need, which is a voting bloc, a group of people that are saying, hey, we're going to put our differences aside. We may not agree on everything, but we agree on a couple things, which is we've got to put our community first. We've got to stop these oligarchs from trying to destroy our state and our country. We've got to take the power back from the donors, and we need to do this without hating people, And the hate part is really important. I want people to understand, I made a commitment a couple months ago where I said, I'm going to stop hating people. I'm going to stop hating Donald Trump. I'm going to stop hating Trump supporters. I don't think that that's helping anybody. There's enough hate in the world, that we can be upset at people. We can hate the actions that they take. We can hate the words that they could say, and without having to be in this state of having so much anger and hate, which I frankly think is, it's destructive to the psyche to be carrying that around.
It's taxing. My shoulders and my neck hurt from that burden already. And I've also been trying to take that word and that mindset out of my life. It's just the stress of work and life and the economy and everything is already enough. How do you have the mental capacity to also hate others?
Yeah. And because a lot of these people, at the end of the day, their problem is that they hate themselves. It's they hate themselves and they can't get over that. And so they push this hate, they project it onto everyone. And when you look at these people, as broken, often almost brainwashed people, I have a lot of empathy for them. I really do, because talking about MAGA basically specifically, they've gotten sucked into this absolute nightmare of a lie, by someone masquerading as a Christian, which drives me crazy, and this whole movement of, evangelical Christian folks who are somehow rabidly pro-war, and that literally, something people need to understand is these folks are trying to manifest the end times in the Middle East. They think that, Israel, when Israel is finally at peace, that Jesus will come back, the Messiah will come back. And it's crazy. It's crazy. And we're letting them lead us into this destruction in a bipartisan way, which is where I am starting to, draw the line in the sand and say, there's a lot of things I'll tolerate. Genocide and, carpet bombing of whole cities and the mass destruction of peoples, it seems like something we should probably draw the line at. And it's been hard because the Democrats, frankly, have us in some way trapped in the two-party system. They both do, the Republicans and the Democrats. And they look at anyone who questions it and say, what are you going to do? For the Republicans, it's like, what are you going to do? Join the pink-haired freaks on the other side? And, for the Democrats, it's like, oh, what are you going to do? Join the white supremacist, colonist Nazis on the other side? And they keep us trapped, and they keep us fighting each other because that's good for their donations. It's good for getting people out to vote. When we are, not fighting the real issue, the real oppressor, which is, the oligarchs, the wealthy, the ruling class, the 1% who are, polluting our world and making our lives, perpetually more and more difficult by siphoning all this money out of the economy.
It's very easy to find ways to separate people and give people reason to dislike somebody because of something and completely ignore what makes them similar.
Yes, exactly. And when you sit down and you focus on what you disagree on, sure, you're going to fight with people all the time.
Yeah, but if you start talking about the things that you like and the things that you value and things that you care about, it's pretty easy to find people that are like-minded for you. And I feel like that's what you're trying to do right now, is you need to start finding the people that are like-minded, that want to donate to your campaign, that want to start volunteering, that want to go out there and start getting signatures, knocking doors, talking to people in their community groups, just letting people know that there are other like-minded individuals in these communities. And where do you think, I'm guessing your website's the best place to go.
VoteKiper.org. If you go there, you can sign up, you can donate. We're trying to really build a movement for change. I think that's kind of the most important thing is status quo ain't working. And the Democrats and Republicans are not really offering up any viable, change to the current status quo. And this is my prediction. There will be a blue wave in 2026. There'll be probably a blue wave in 2028. And if the Democrats do not pursue legislation that meaningfully changes people's lives, you're going to have probably Tucker Carlson by 2034 president. You know what I mean? Or somebody else, or some other charlatan is going to take Trump's spot and is going to say, oh, while the Democrats failed to give you health, Medicare for all or whatever, or housing, don't forget about how the immigrants are the ones that are the problem. Oh, don't forget, actually, your life is bad because trans kids play sports, or you can't afford a home because of, because of the foreign invasion at the border or whatever. They're gonna drum up these same old tired lines that divide people, and that's why Democrats have got to have a policy. We've got to have solutions, and we have to have politicians that are willing to say no to the donors that are trying to manipulate us out of doing the things we need to do to get reelected.
Well, yeah, because now as soon as you start listening to the donors and their money, you stop listening to your community. You stop helping those that you're running for office for. And I read it in the book, and if anybody doesn't know, communityfirsteconomics.com, you can go there and get the book. You can read the book. You can share it with people. Just start thinking a little differently and zoom out and understand that there's people in your communities that are hurting and that you can help by just speaking up a little bit, or going into the Reddit comments or the Facebook comments and say, hey, you should read this book, or you should check out this campaign. Don't tell people who to vote for. Just let them know that there's a difference in opinion that might exist out there that they might resonate to, and that's why you're running for governor. And I think people need to go to votekiper.org, and we need to wrap up this podcast because you've already drank this much water in like 40 minutes, and I can tell you're thirsty, and we should wrap it up. But we're going to be back with another podcast episode coming up. We need people, though, that want to join the campaign and they want to get their voices heard. Donations, volunteers, all these things, and or just, again, read the book, communityfirsteconomics.com. Go to his website, follow him on all the social media channels that you follow. I think that's a very wise idea. That's kind of what I did, and I was able to find a candidate that started to talk in ways that resonated with me and was like, okay, this is different from everything else that I've been hearing my entire adult life. And I'm kind of just sick of these people walking on all over me and not actually do anything for us.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, we'll see you guys soon. Thank you.